Erev Tov, everyone. The Torah predicts the Jewish future from the beginning. And Moshe Rabbeinu speaks to the Jewish people. So we will see later in the Torah, in Chumash Dvarim, the Torah portrays for us the Tochacha, portrays for us the exiles, portrays for us literally the Shoah, and also portrays the future Geula of Klal Yisrael, the redemption of Israel. And the Ramban says in one of his famous comments that if a person stood up and told you what was going to be 750 years from now, you would be impressed. You know, we live in a time I can't tell you what's going to happen 7.5 minutes from now. Someone would have told you 3 years ago, 4 years ago, that this is the way the world would look in 4 years. You know, you'd say the person lost his mind. And here Moshe Rabbeinu details it for the Jewish people. And that casts light on the Mishkan as well, because the basic idea of the Mishkan, as the Torah itself describes it, V'yosuli migdash v'shachanti b'sochon. They should make for me a house, a migdash, dedicated place of worship and service. But v'shachanti b'sochon, I will dwell in their midst, within them. So on the surface, that is a contradiction. It should say, V'yosuli migdash v'shachanti b'sochon. I'll dwell in the migdash. And the Shechina was in the migdash. So why does it say b'sochon? So the Meforshim point out that the Rabbanu Shalom is telling them in advance that the Mishkan will not survive, the Mikdash will not survive, and therefore the Mikdash is only a tool, v'shochanti b'sochon, because only b'sochon can it survive within the Jewish people. And that would enable the Jewish people to survive the exile and not to be restricted to any one place in the world, and to remain the Zgula Mikol Ha'amim, the Mamlechas Kohanim B'Goy Kadosh. So that's why it says V'shochanti b'sochon. God is telling us in advance. V'yosuli migdash, you're making for me a mishkan, a migdash, good, fine. But that's not the future always. There'll be most of Jewish history will be without a Mikdash. So the Mishkan survived the 40 years in the desert and about 350 years in Shiloh. So you have like 400 years of the Mishkan. And then the Mishkan disappeared. Different opinions as to how the Mishkan disappeared. The most accepted version is that it was buried somewhere, the remnants of it. The Aron HaKodesh and the menorah went into the Beit HaMikdash of Shlomo. The rest of it, the Urios, and the Parochas, and everything was swallowed up. It's not here anymore. So then you have a period of the Bayis Rishon, which was built by Shlomo HaMelech, which lasted 410 years. The Bayis Rishon for 200 years was the Bayis of Shlomo that he originally built. But then we read in the Haftorah last week in Parsha Shkolim that the Melech Yehoash had to rebuild it. The building deteriorated. The Berek Habayis required special funds and special workmen. And it's a question of decades in rebuilding it. We see that in the Haftorah. And then it lasted until the Navi Yirmiyah and the Churban Bayis Rishon. What happened to the artifacts in the Churban Bayis Rishon? So the Midrashim tell us that Yirmiyah Novi buried them, and that they're buried somewhere in Eretz Yisrael. The Aron, the menorah. So it did not go into the Golas in Bavel, and it was not captured by the Babylonians or the Assyrians when they took it away. Unlike the Bayis Sheni, which we'll discuss in a minute. So now there is no Mikdash. So how are we Makayim v'shachanti b'sochon? So Ezra and the Anshe Knesset Hagdolah substituted for the Mikdash, but the Knessia, the synagogues, Makomos Tefillah, but they Midrash to learn. So that became the Vishachanti B'Sochon in the 70 years of the Golos. Then they come back, Ezra comes back, and at the end of 70 years, there Ezra and Nehemiah received permission to rebuild the Beis HaMikdash. And they build the Bayis Sheni against great objections from the local inhabitants, the Shomronim, the Samaritans, other Jews. They're always in opposition. And they build a second Beis HaMikdash. Chazal tell us that the second Beis HaMikdash, when it was originally built, in the time of Ezra, was hardly an impressive building. It was a puny building. It was little more than the Mizbeach and the curtains, and surrounded by wooden structure. He didn't have the gold and silver and marble that Shlomo HaMelech had in the Bayis Rishon. Chazal say the famous Medrash, Skanim Shebov Sador, the Skanim, the older people who remembered yet the first Beis HaMikdash, wept, not out of joy, but out of disappointment. This is a Beis HaMikdash. This is what it looks like. But Ezra had only the tools that he had. The Jewish people did not have wealth. They didn't have the opportunity to build out of gold and silver and marble. So they built a plain wooden structure. This Beis Hamikdash lasted till the time of the Chashmonaim. So it's about 100 years. In the time of Chashmonaim, the Greeks came and they took over the Mikdash. So now you had a Mikdash that was a base of Avodah Zarah, which is all forecast in the Torah. The Timu es Mikdashi. We say that in Alanissim and Mosul. They defiled the Mikdash. They took something that was dedicated Kaviochel to the Ribono Shalom, and they created out of it a base of Avodah Zarah. The Torah forecast that. So the Chashmonaim came and were successful. The Tiaru es Mikdashi. So they made the Beis Hamikdash Tohor again. So now there was a Beis Hamikdash. And the Chashmonaim ruled for 103 years. And at the time of Alexander Yanai, who was the most powerful of the Chashmonaim kings, he rebuilt the Mikdash. Now it was a stone structure, and now it had a glitter to it. There's a difference of opinion in the Meforshim whether the menorah that was lit for Hanukkah was a new menorah or the old menorah. But he substituted a new gold menorah. And the Beis Hamikdash was b'tifarta. But again, the Romans came and the Chashmonaim were destroyed. And Antipater became the head of the Judea, and his son Hordus became the ruler over the Jewish people. And Hordus wanted to ingratiate himself to the people. He knew he was a very unpopular king. He had killed off all of the Chashmonaim. So the Gemara says anybody who says they're from the Chashmonaim should know that he's an Eved, he's from Hordus, he's not from the Chashmonaim, that nobody left. So Ramban asks the famous question, how could it be the Chashmonaim that were so great in defense of Judaism should suffer such a fate that they have no descendants amongst Klal Yisrael? Because Chazal always measured success, so to speak, in the continuity of generations and descendants. So in any event, in order to gain the gratitude of the Jewish people, Hordus rebuilt the Beis Hamikdash. And he rebuilt it, and you see any of the buildings of Hordus in the country, he builds on a grand scale. And the Beis Hamikdash of Hordus, Chazal say, Misha lo roa binyan Hordus, lo roa binyan Noam Yomov. You don't know what an impressive building looks like if you never saw the Beis Hamikdash of Hordus. Chazal tell us that the Beis Hamikdash of Hordus, he brought Carrara marble from Italy to tile the floor, and the Carrara marble had in it a blue streaks, so that when the sun shone on it, it looked like the waves of the sea. And everything was gold and silver. And tapestries. the Gemara teaches us that they had 3 different sets of parochas, and that the parochas were such a size that you need 60 workmen to deal with one parochas to install it. And the whole world came to see it. You can see today remnants in the archaeology that signs that say in Greek, this is as far as non-Jews can go. It marks the line. So it was a great, enormously beautiful building. According to the Roman authorities and officers, it was one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world. And it was built as a fireproof building. Basically all stone. And yet it was destroyed by fire on Tisha B'Av. And so again, the Osuli Migdash part of it failed. And therefore it had the Shochanti B'Socham is what remained. And it became the charge of the Jewish people in order to survive. And that was the role of Torah, especially Torah Shabbal Peh, that wherever the Jews went, they went with the Torah. And that guaranteed V'shochanti b'sochom. So the Torah told us all of this in advance. The Novi Yecheskel talks to us about the Bayis Shlishi. There'll be a 3rd Beis Hamikdash. The question is, will it be V'yosuli Migdash? Will it be created by human beings? Or whether it will be miraculously created somehow. And there's a difference of opinion between Rashi and the Meiri and others. Different opinions on what the Bayis Shlishi will be and how it will come into being. But only with the Bayis Shlishi will you have that combination permanent of the Osuli Migdash and the Shochanti B'Socham. So then that will be realized, the Novi Yecheskel says, with the Bayis Shlishi, B'meira v'yameinu yiboneh. Rabbi Chananya ben Akasha, Merotz HaKadosh Baruch Hu L'zakas, Es Yisrael Lefichach, Yirbolehen Torah Mitzvot Shenemar, Adonai Chafetz and Tzidko Yagdil Torah v'Yavir.